So let's move to Donald Trump and Raphael, Edward Ted Cruz. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I wrote 2 articles this week about presidential eligibility, in which one of them I mentioned Ted Cruz, and that he should address the issues that are being brought up about his eligibility. Well, I can tell you that if you're talking about presidential eligibility, the Cruz supporters are just as nasty and irrational as the Obama supporters.
Yeah.
So, I caught a lot of flack about that.
Well, I did too, but now, so what, right?
Yeah, so what? But, it's getting to be typical that we have a political situation where, you're either on one side or the other. You're either with us or against us. There's so little objectivity in politics today, which is a shame.
Did you notice, and I think we did speak about this, the president goes to Hawaii. There's no mention of any of his childhood or, his young adulthood taking place in Hawaii. And, if George Bush were to go to Midland, Texas, they'd talk about it. If Jimmy Carter went to Plains, they'd talk about it. And it's fascinating again. And now they bring up the term birther, but there's never any mention of Barack Obama when they start talking birther, do they?
Oh, no, but they're using it as a pejorative, for the people who are raising the issues about Cruz, which, quite frankly, I think are legitimate questions.
And why is it legit to talk about Ted Cruz?
Well, there are 2 aspects that I have focused on. One is we know he was born in Canada.
Sure.
Now, if your child is born overseas, in order for that child to become a U.S. citizen, the parents have to go to the U.S. consulate and bring the birth certificate and prove that at least one of the parents is a U.S. citizen. And then you fill out some forms, and then the consulate decides whether the child should be a U.S. citizen. So there is a process and a paper trail. And I can tell you this for a fact because I did it. One of my children was born overseas, and I had to go through that whole process. I would like to know, how and when Ted Cruz became a U.S. citizen. I mean, where is the paperwork on that?
Mm-hmm.
When did it happen? How did it happen? None of this has been released, and I think it would be fair to the public to know this. Now, the other issue, which you know very, very well, and but we've spoken about it, and you've spoken about it with others, is what is the meaning of natural-born citizenship? Ted Cruz says because he was a citizen by birth, that makes him a natural-born citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everything that I've always read about natural-born citizenship is that, it's a person who was born a U.S. citizen of 2 parents who were also U.S. citizens.
Yeah, that's the Obama. That's the Obama curveball.
Yeah, so that's what happened is that, when Obama came along, that suddenly changed, that it was okay that one parent would be a U.S. citizen. Yeah. So what's happening now is it seems that Ted Cruz is playing the Obama card.
I thought so too.
Essentially we have, constitutional amendment by press release.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a question. His dad's a Cuban, his mom's U.S., but he's born in Canada. Flip it. She's a U.S. citizen. She's in Cuba, and she gives birth, and his father's a Cuban, obviously, and she, an American citizen, but Raphael was born in Havana as opposed to Calgary. Would they then say he's a U.S. citizen? And this other renouncing the Canadian citizenship in May of 14, I think, it isn't that long ago. It's only 2 years ago. So the whole thing is really fascinating to me. And if I flipped it, because was perception of Canada, which was the Chester Arthur. That was part of the Chester Arthur question, wasn't it? Chester Arthur.
It is believed that Chester A. Arthur lied about his background as well, that he wasn't a natural-born citizen as he claimed.
And Martin Van Buren was another one, wasn't he?
Well, I think Martin Van Buren was actually the first president who was a natural-born citizen. I think that was the takeoff point. Before then, they were people.
They're British. They
under the British.
Yeah, they were British citizens, British subjects.
Right.
Jefferson, Washington, Adams, they were British subjects. So Van Buren's the jump off.
Yes, I believe Van Buren was the first one to use a natural citizen.
So, but if Ted Cruz were born in Cuba, with a Cuban father and a U.S. mom, what would his situation be?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, you're just taking, the facts as we know them and turning them around a bit and asking a question which you may get a completely different answer by the politicians or the press.
So is this, I love Trump. I mean, I'm an unabashed Trump fan. Trump does this, and I always think Trump comes at you at a couple different levels. Is he bringing again the Obama scenario? And is he going to force out once again at Obama, who obviously, I think in many ways, Obama lives in fear of what Trump is capable of saying next, because he gets all the attention. It isn't like, you or Jerry Corsi or Joel Gilbert or some idiot like me, but Trump gets the spotlight. And I think Trump was one of the reasons they manufactured the birth certificate that they brought out, trotted out at that press conference for Barack Obama. I think Trump forced that hand. I don't know how you feel about that. So I think there's an awful lot in play right now with them asking these questions about Ted Cruz.
Yeah, I think that you make an interesting point. I hadn't thought about it, but it may very well be that he's, playing two cards at once, that he's questioning Cruz, which I think he has a legitimate right to question because there are unanswered questions. But at the same time, he's putting Barack Obama back on his heels just like he did, when he brought up the birth certificate to begin with several years ago.
No, I agree. I know Jerry's book was dropping, but at the same time, I think Trump had a lot more weight. And I think it's one of the places where maybe Trump makes some decisions about what he's going to do. But I don't know. So if you just joined us, I'm a big fan of this guy's work. Colonel Lawrence Sellin is with us. Ted Cruz, what should Cruz do next, or what should we look for?
I think Cruz should release the information of how and when he became a U.S. citizen. I think that's a logical question. The fact that it hasn't been released, I'm a little bit surprised because it is raising, eyebrows. So, it may all be on the up and up.
I agree.
But if he doesn't release it, people are going to think that he's hiding something.
Here's a question too and I don't know the answer to. How do you renounce another citizenship? According to what we're reading, he renounces in 2014 his Canadian side. How do you do that? And where do you do it?
Yeah, I think you have to go to a Canadian embassy or go to Canada and file papers with the Canadian government.
Okay.
So you have to officially announce it. If you were going to a foreign country and you didn't want to be a U.S. citizen anymore, you would go to the U.S. embassy or consulate and say, I don't want to be a U.S. citizen anymore.
But the one story is the story I know is Lee Harvey Oswald, and that's that was very masked. How does this guy get out of the Marine Corps and head off to Soviet Union, then come back? Announcing, renouncing, announcing, and renouncing. And he always is this strange character, but he did that, or allegedly did it. There's not much proof of that either. But that's a strange story as well.
Yes, I agree. I don't think there's any explanation for how he got there at first and then came back
and made a decision to come back.
Fine.
And he was welcomed back with open arms. That's just too crazy. That's way too crazy. All right, sir. What would you like to leave us with this morning? Thoughts for the weekend?
Well, thoughts for the weekend. I think it's about the subject we're talking about. What's going to happen to Ted Cruz? Either they're going to try to bury it, which they seem to be doing. There's a lot of people on the right who are saying, well, this is it's settled law, as Cruz and his supporters say, and everybody has to shut up about it. So I'm looking forward to the next week or so before the Iowa caucuses to see if this has traction or it's going to be buried like the Obama situation.
Yeah, man. And the Obama one, I think, just sits there precariously. You and I discussed that Washington Post piece about his, not being raised in a religious household, which of course is nonsense, but it was a Muslim household. It was an Islamic household, and I don't know.
Yes.
They dance from the flame, but I think more and more people are getting hip to how big media works. Take care of yourself, Colonel. We'll talk next week on a couple of topics. Thank you for doing the show. Have a good weekend, sir. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Peter.
Lawrence Sellin. We got to open lines. We go to Gary. Gary, thanks for calling the radio show. Good morning and welcome. Friday.
Thank you, Peter. I'd like to say hi to my friend Larry Sellin.
Oh, sure.
I'm out here in California.
Oh, okay.
I am a birther, otherwise known as a constitutionalist.
Yep.
And I'd like to make a few quick points, if I may. Even if Ted Cruz went through this, what is actually a naturalization process, he wasn't native-born American. He's not natural-born citizen. That's my point. He still would not be a natural-born citizen and would not be eligible to be president. But the other issue is that Cruz was born a Cuban citizen under Cuban law.
Well, that's my question.
Looked up. I've done the research. Through the bloodline of his father. I'd like to know the status of that citizen.
Well, it's fascinating because it really plays out in Barack Obama. But so he was born in Canada. Suppose he was born in Havana instead of Calgary.
I think he'd be a native-born and natural-born Cuban citizen and could perhaps apply for American citizenship.
I agree.
His American mother.
I agree.
But they'd have to go through the process, and I kind of doubt if they were living in Cuba, they'd be inclined to want to be American citizens.
Yeah, remember that great line, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander.
Right. Well, the other point, and then I'll let you guys talk, but the other point that in my research, the natural-born citizen definition and the intent of the founding fathers has never been changed. Congress, under its enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8, can only make laws regarding naturalization.
That's right.
And many of the Cruz bots out there are hanging their hat on, they're constantly citing statutes. Well, prior to 1934, and I hope your audience is listening carefully to what I say, prior to 1934, the law on the books would have precluded Cruz from getting citizenship through his American mother because the law was he could only get it through the father. It's only subsequent statutes that have been modified and have contingencies attached to them, like residency, is he even able to get citizenship through his mother? And like Larry said, we don't even know. The Cruz campaign will not release that information. Something's amiss, and Ted Cruz is being very deceitful with the Texas voters when he ran for Senate and now running for president. He's a political opportunist, and he cares more about himself than the Constitution and the voters of this country.
I can't speak to that, but I can speak to the mechanics of, or at least what I know of the mechanics of what this natural-born application is. The reason is because of being a birther and being drawn into the morass of who is Barack Obama. But I can't help but think, and perhaps you could add to that, Donald Trump pulls these rabbits out of his hat that are great. And he had one time, I've seen the cut where he kind of green lights Cruz. And now, people say, well, it's because of, Cruz is doing well in Iowa, which may or may not be true. But I'm not quite sure that he's not setting up a sucker punch on Barack Obama.
Well, I can give you some insight on the Trump issue. I was privy back in, I think it was 2011, 2012. I'm so confused that I've been following this for so long. I was quite privy to the details behind the meeting with Trump and the people that went from Arizona, headed by Jeff Lichter.
I remember that.
That was with Michael Cohen and Trump's staff.
That's true.
And had their photos taken in Trump's office, and I talked to these people, and I was very intimately involved in giving phone calls after the meeting. I was very privileged to know what was going on. Donald Trump absolutely 100%, I guarantee you, knows everything about the definition of natural-born citizen and the status of Obama. And yet, not long after that, at a press dinner, Obama insulted Trump upside down, and made him look stupid.
They knew he was coming,
Trump has kept quiet about this, but Trump knows everything. Everything.
Well, then it very well may be because, at one time, and I was, critiqued and made fun of for saying it, but I used to always think that we should have a summit with, people like yourself and, Dr. Corsi and Sellin and Arthur Gill. I can give you a list of people that
I know. I've listened to your program.
Well,
I really enjoy listening from California on the podcast.
Well, you're kind.
Primarily.
But I thought, a summit and try and, issue what they call a white paper on what is the truth about Barack Obama? What do we know, or what do we believe? What do we believe, and what is missing? And I do believe that, although Jerry Corsi's book was coming, Where's the Birth Certificate? It was Trump that forced that manufacturer by the kid I call Jimmy down the hall. Somebody made that birth certificate, which is a phony birth certificate. But that came principally, I think, because of Trump. And
I agree.
Yeah.
But, Trump, would love to take all the credit. There's a lot of people working.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely. That have put pressure on Obama.
I totally agree. I absolutely agree.
The problem is that the media, won't report the truth and distorts and lies. And then you have people like Mark Levin, the great one, the great constitutional expert.
Right.
That people just hang on his every word. If he says it must be true. His explanation of Cruz is his candidate. There's no question about it. And he's going to do everything he can to make him eligible. And what he's been doing on the radio, he has a listenership of 10 million people. And his lackey, Sean Hannity, he's got another 12 million.
But again,
they're out there spouting statutes and ignoring the definition and the intent of natural-born citizen and the intent of the founders. They're doing a great disservice to the American voters.
I was on a stage with Hugh Hewlett, who just went, I'm not a birther. I tell everyone I'm not about a birther. And he was just, I'm sitting on the stage with a guy with some colleagues, and he just, I just tell everybody I'm not a birther. Yeah, then you get to go to the debates, and you get to go to CNN, and you get to do these things, because God knows if the minute you say you're a birther, then you become automatically a racist. You become a bigot.
But birthers are constitutionalists.
Well, birthers are.
Many of the articles out there on the internet and media reports define birther in their terms. They say there are people that believe Obama was born in Kenya.
Doesn't matter.
Or they make up their own definitions.
But it doesn't matter.
True birthers just care about the Constitution and getting to the truth.
And the truth, and what I say all the time, and this is hackneyed at this point, that every time there's a critique, every time I'm called a hater or a bigot or a racist, I go out of my way to politely invite these people on the show. There's one of two things happen. One is they ignore the invitation, or they say, I will not appear on your hate show. And so, it's like Bill Clinton, we're not going to respond to that anymore. And you don't want to respond to the truth. But the bottom line is, the time will out. I use the Kennedys as my example. The time will out, maybe not in my lifetime, that the truth will be known that Barack Obama fabricated a life. Now, what is the truth? I have no idea. But I do.
Well, you have an idea. You have an idea.
Well, I have no knowledge. Maybe that's my better way of saying it. But so everything else is a guess. You're a good man, Gary.
Thank you.
Keep the fire on, man. Thanks, brother. All right, we go here. This is Jess. Jess, you're on the show. Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning, brother.
Hey, glad you're on the mend.
I'm hip.
Yeah. Hey, Mark Levin, what he said, and this guy isn't that far off, but he basically said there are 6 ways of being a citizen in the United States, and all boils down.
But that doesn't make you eligible for president. In other words, Schwarzenegger is a U.S. citizen, but he's not eligible to be president.
But neither one of his parents were American to begin with.
I know that, but he's a U.S. citizen.
And one of them is if you have a parent that was American, and maybe it's going to have to go down to the courts, but it'll prove out.
But I've heard Levin say that 8 ways to become a citizen. But and I don't want to take on. Listen, what I'm saying to you, being a citizen doesn't qualify you for being president.
Who's that great senator from Arizona?
Barry Goldwater. But when Barry was born, Arizona was still a territory. It wasn't a state. So he was a
senator from Arizona right now.
Well, there's 2 of them. Which one? You're talking about McCain? McCain was he's a zonie. He was born in the Canal Zone, which was U.S. At the time, and his dad, who was I think his father's nickname I think was Popeye, and there was Popeye, and then there was he had the 2 different, the grandfather and father, but his father was a U.S. citizen, his mother was a U.S. citizen, the Canal Zone was U.S. He was born there. He qualifies. Not even a problem.
Well, the way I've heard it, no matter where you're born in the world, if one of your parents is an American citizen, you're an American citizen. I
don't think that whole, but you're talking about qualifying for president. And I'm not, listen, believe me when I tell you, I have lots of question marks. I don't have a definitive answer. But I think what Sellin is saying is there isn't, and I think
it opens up a lot of questions answered for Obama too, because
oh man, that's where it is.
He, if he was, and his mother was an American, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, there's no question that Stanley Ann is a U.S. citizen.
Whoever his handlers were probably told him, "Hey, say that you're an import, and you'll get all this free stuff," and that's probably why he locked up all
that trail tails back into so many different issues, and that's why it's so unclear, Jess. You talk about a murky past. It's Barack Obama.
Even with that, it leaves a lot of stuff still unanswered.
Oh no, totally, absolutely. But when and where did the cover-ups begin, and who did it, and for what reasons, and when was the selective service card manufactured, and the birth certificate that comes out of a Social Security number that he has no right having as a Connecticut number, and all the craziness around his life, brother. You can't. And I don't. And Cruz is not nearly that complex.
No.
I think Cruz is just a question.
There's a lot of heap up on him because establishment doesn't like him; they hate him.
Well, and they hate Trump too. So, but I guess what I'm saying to you is, with Cruz, there's not a question of his life story, and it's just really this issue of what does happen. And I think it's probably going to have to get answered one way or the other.
Yeah, it'll pan out.
Yeah. Good call, man. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you.